Hello APUSH, welcome to Unit 3 Part 2. Today we're going to cover Native Americans and we'll get all the way to the cool stuff section where I'll show you guys some movies for Unit 3 and some other cool videos. Now, 1854 to 1800, 7 Years' War, up to Jefferson, 12% of the exam. Okay. Overview, talked about it last time. We're looking at the Revolution is the big chunk over here, and then we're looking at how we're forming our new government, our new country. What is that going to look like? That's what we're dealing with. Alright, let's start off with Native Americans. A big part of this unit is Native Americans. They're going to fight for both sides in the 7 Years' War. So they will fight on the British side, they will fight on the French side, and both sides are going to promise them land. They'll say, hey, Native Americans, if you fight for us, we'll give you your territorial land back. Now the British win, and they do not end up giving those natives their land at all. In fact, the natives aren't even invited to the peace treaty to discuss what to do with the French land. So you can see how much the the British value that allied partnership. We will also get the Pontiac's Rebellion the same year the war ends. This stems from the British people expanding out into that new territory they gained. Those colonists in the 13 colonies are going to start spreading out into this new territory. And so there's going to be rebellion where the Native Americans are going to attack a bunch of English settlements, which is going to lead the British to pass the Proclamation of 1763, which is this line here. Okay, so we have Pontiac's Rebellion, we get a bunch of fighting, and the British government is going to say no more crossing this line, you may not do that. Okay, and that's to stop any further war in the British colonies. This is another thing that's going to anger the colonists. They were the ones who fought alongside other British people, of course, but they fight and they died in the French and Indian Wars. They want the land that they fought for, and the British government is now telling them, no, you cannot have it. So again, it's going to lead to more tensions, which will lead to the Revolutionary War. Now we also have the Native Americans fighting on both sides of the Revolutionary War. Again, the Americans are going to promise them land, the British will promise them land, and the Native Americans will not get any once the Americans win. So again, you can see Native Americans are getting screwed once again. In response to this, they are going to form what is called the Western Confederacy, which is a confederacy of tribes up here in kind of the Northwest Ordinance area. And they are going to start attacking Americans who are expanding into that territory. The Americans are going to crush this resistance, and once again, every time we have one of these Native American resistances, we see their tribes getting weaker and weaker each time. We also have, out on the East Coast, California, we have these Spanish missionaries going up the coast from Spain or Mexico. They're going up the coast here and settling a whole bunch of these missionaries. Now the point of these missionaries, according to the Spanish, is to convert Native Americans to Christianity. I mean, under this Spanish system, that roughly translates to use them as slaves, okay? And this is led by Junipero Serra. Now they claim it's to convert natives, but really it's to make sure that they have a claim up here in California because they see America spreading west, they see the Russians coming south, and they get nervous, so they start spreading their mission system here. Now an interesting note, Junipero Serra for a long time was kind of seen as a California hero. We have high schools named after him and streets named after him. But I bet you could imagine as a Native American going to the Junipero Serra High School, you might have a different opinion on that name since he was the guy who led kind of a slavery campaign up into California for the Spanish. All right, next up we have women. The first group you should know about are the Daughters of Liberty, again going back to the American Revolution. Now, how are women going to help in the Revolution? They are going to sew clothes for the soldiers. They're going to raise money, actually quite a bit of money too, and they're going to boycott British goods. Okay, and this is a very big movement. They want those soldiers to know that when they get the shirts and they get the socks and things sewed by these women, that they're coming from the women at home. So women want to have a part in the revolution. Now, why do you think that is? My bet would be is they thought, hey, if we can fight here too in any way possible, maybe we'll gain some of the freedoms our husbands are fighting for. We also get the idea of Republican motherhood, or the idea that American women are, their task is to raise good American men who believe in democracy and republicanism and freedom and liberty and things like that, right? So women have two roles here of sending supplies up to the front and raising good American men. We also get an interesting document by Abigail Adams, John Adams' wife, where she writes him and says, hey, remember the ladies, okay? Don't forget us in your revolution. Get us some rights, please. We helped out, so remember your wife. And John, good old John, says no. Basically, he writes back and says, women aren't ready to have rights. They're not going to be involved in government. It's a man's job. You stay at home. So we see some continuity where women still are not able to gain rights. Now, African Americans during this revolutionary period, they, as just like the Native Americans, are going to fight on both sides of the American Revolutionary War. The British will tell them that slavery has been outlawed in Britain and you can live as a free citizen if you leave. And the Americans are going to say, we're fighting for freedom, so of course you'll be welcome to be free if you fight on the side of America. And of course, they will not get freedom from the Americans at all, okay? Now, more are going to fight on the side of the British because they have been living in the colonies for a long time, so they kind of can read the writing on the wall, and they don't want to fight on the side of this new country. We do have some African Americans who are revolutionary leaders. We have Crispus Attucks. He is an African American killed in the Boston Massacre, 1773. So we see this kind of early revolutionary. He's put in a lot of portraits to try to get African Americans on the American side in the Revolutionary War. So he is an important figure. As far as the Constitutional Convention goes, we have the Three-Fifths Compromise, okay? Now, what this says is that slaves, when we count representation, they are going to count as 3/5 of a person. So for every 5 slaves you have, that gives you 3 people as far as representation goes in Congress. This gives the South a lot of power in the federal government, which is pretty significant. We also have Northern Emancipation, okay? Now, there isn't an Emancipation Proclamation in the North. What happens is it's gradual, okay? So as the North becomes more industrial, they rely less on farming, slavery is going to slowly be less needed, and it's just going to go away naturally. And again, this is going to lead to that sectionalism becoming more of an issue. We also see the new Constitution having no mention of slavery in it, but it will be used to protect slaves, or slavers' rights, rather, okay? So when slavery issues come up, the Supreme Court is going to kind of consistently rule that slavery is a constitutional right, and so slavery is being protected by the Constitution at this time. As far as immigrants and foreigners are concerned, again, it's kind of early in American history to be talking about immigrants. We do see the Alien Act being passed under Adams. And this says the federal government can deport any non-citizens who they deem are a danger to American society. Now, he does this when tensions are high with France because of the French Revolution and Jay's Treaty, so it's more of like an anti-French kind of security issue, but we do see the beginning of non-citizens or foreigners kind of being persecuted in America. As far as technology, culture, and reform go, in period 3, we see a couple important documents. Common Sense by Thomas Paine is published early in the Revolutionary period, and this document is important because it spreads revolutionary culture through America. It basically argues that independence is a no-brainer. Americans should be independent. Britain is tyrannical. So common sense is important to American culture at the time. We also see 2 different rebellions that are after the American Revolution. So Shays' Rebellion, which is a rebellion against a new tax, and the federal government is actually too weak to put this rebellion down, okay? This is under our Articles of Confederation, which we'll talk about in a second, but the federal government is too weak to put it down. But then we have the Whiskey Rebellion, which is now under the Constitution, okay? This one, very similarly, is a rebellion against a new tax on whiskey, and Washington, with the new power of the federal government, can put down this rebellion, and they do demand that the citizens pay the whiskey tax. So you can see the difference. Articles of Confederation, Shays' Rebellion, too weak to put it down. They have to pay a private militia to put down Shays' Rebellion. And then you have the Whiskey Rebellion, where Washington can use the new power of the federal government to crush that thing. Now we also see in culture, sectionalism again is increasing. The Northwest Ordinance is going to be anti-slave. This area up here is starting to emancipate slavery because of a changing economy, whereas the South is continuing to expand as slave owners. So we see the North and South regional identities cementing as anti-slave, industrial kind of elite, and we see the South as pro-slave, rural farming culture. Now, in this period, we're finally going to get to see some federal government. We're finally going to get to see the relationship between the federal government, states, individuals start to develop, okay? Now, we talked about the Articles of Confederation. They failed. They're kind of a bummer document, but we do get the Constitution, okay? Now, under this Constitution, we see the Great Compromise. It's different than that 3/5 compromise. The Great Compromise is what makes a bicambrial Congress. Now what that is we have 2 houses in the Congress, the Senate and the House. One's based on population, one is just, you just get 2 senators per state, okay? So this makes all the small states happy, like New Jersey. This makes all the big states happy, like Virginia. You might remember the New Jersey versus the Virginia plan during the Continental Congress, but just remember that Great Compromise, okay? We also get the Bill of Rights. Okay, now this is the first 10 amendments, which means a change or an addition to the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And they guarantee personal liberties like the freedom of religion, speech, press, right to bear arms, no quartering of soldiers, all this stuff. Now, this is really going to get put into the Constitution by the anti-federalists, right? They say, fine, You can have the Constitution, you can have a stronger federal government, but you have to add some guarantees for my personal liberty. That's only fair, okay? So again, we see this kind of balancing act between big federal government and personal liberties and bigger state government. You see that in the Great Compromise as well. We also have the Alien and Sedition Acts. I mentioned the Alien Acts earlier, but this is passed under John Adams. And let me tell you, this is why he is going to lose that 1800 re-election campaigns, because he passes these acts that are enormously unpopular. What they say is he can deport non-citizens that the federal government deems as a threat, and he can arrest people for falsely accusing the federal government of something, okay? So a lot of people, Jefferson included, and his Democratic Republicans are going to say, hey, that's a violation of our Bill of Rights. You can't take away our freedom of speech like that. And it's really the reason that Jefferson is going to take the White House from Adams, okay? Now, we see Jefferson taking office 1801, and he's going to win, like I said, because he's focusing on a smaller federal government, and the South especially is going to like his tone, okay? This is also the first peaceful transfer of power from John Adams, a Federalist, to Jefferson, a Democratic Republican. Now, to summarize, let's take a look at some turning points. First one, I'm leaving a lot out here, but the first big one is the Declaration of Independence, 1776. This is the start of a brand new country. It's the start of the Revolutionary War. It is certainly a turning point. We have 1783, the Treaty of Paris. America is born on the global stage, so again, a very big turning point. We have the Constitution being ratified or accepted by all the states in 1788, so we have our modern government created. We're still on the same Constitution today. A lot of other countries base their Constitution on ours, so this is a big turning point in not only U.S. history, but world history as well. 1801, like I just mentioned, we have the first peaceful transfer of power from those Federalists to the Democratic Republicans. This transfer of power didn't need to go smoothly, right? You could have had Adams say, no, I'm going to hold on to the presidency forever and become a king, but luckily America didn't work like that, and we had a peaceful transfer of power, just as we have had in all our elections since then. We can break this thing into two sub-periods. Increasing British control with the new taxes, with the new trade regulations, and then after 1776, we have the formation of a new country, okay? We are creating our own country and deciding what we're going to do, right? How are we going to be different than the British? Change in continuity. We do get some changes here, right? We get global revolutions from the American Revolution in Latin America, France, Haiti, so we see a big change in that sense. We see an increase in sectionalism, so we see the North and the South growing further and further apart. We see new political parties in the form of the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. We see states versus federal issues arising. Those will continue for a long time. We see an increase in territory with that Northwest territory and those southern states expanding west. Now, what is continuous? Native Americans are going to continue to lose land and get screwed over by European and then American powers. African Americans as well are going to continue to be screwed over. They will remain slaves, and slavery will continue to spread west. We also see women attempt to get some political rights, but again, they will not be granted any. They won't see the right to vote for almost another 50 years. Now, characterize. How would you characterize or name this unit? That's up to you. Is it the Revolutionary period, the New Government period? That is your call. Unit 3, cool stuff. As far as Founding Fathers go, shout out to Liam. You should check out Hamilton. Listen to the tracks on Spotify. It is a good listen. American Revolution, we have the Patriot. Not terribly accurate, but still a fun watch nonetheless. Mel Gibson is a terrible person, but I respect his acting. Now, shout out to Miguel. We have the American Revolution Oversimplified on YouTube, an excellent series. Check that out for a quick, funny review. And we have Too Late to Apologize, a declaration, a wonderful song. I highly recommend you look that up and listen to it. That is it for Unit 3, Period 3. Thank you guys. I hope you guys are staying safe. Make sure that you're eating 3 square meals a day